Look at this landscape. From high above, the patchwork fields of Somerset, the gentle curves of its rivers, and the soft mounds of its hills create a scene of tranquil, almost timeless beauty. It's a view that feels familiar, comforting, a part of England's very soul. But what if that familiarity is an illusion? What if this entire countryside is not simply a product of nature, but something far more astonishing, a colossal, secret masterpiece, a map of the heavens deliberately laid out across the earth on a scale so vast it can only be seen from the air? This is the heart of the mystery we are about to explore, the Glastonbury Zodiac. It's a theory that suggests the hills, roads, and waterways around the ancient town of Glastonbury form a giant terrestrial zodiac, a 12-part celestial circle etched into the landscape, possibly thousands of years ago. It's one of Britain's most captivating and enduring historical puzzles, a secret hiding in plain sight, waiting for those with the curiosity to see the land not just for what it is, but for what it might represent. The idea alone is enough to stir the imagination. Imagine the sheer ambition of such a project. We're not talking about carving a small symbol on a stone, but shaping the very land itself to mirror the constellations. This would be an act of staggering vision, a project spanning generations, requiring a profound connection to both the earth and the sky. Who could have done this? Was it the ancient Britons, the Druids, or perhaps an even earlier, lost civilization? And for what purpose? Was it a giant astronomical clock to track the seasons, a sacred representation of their mythology, or a protective talisman for the land, encoding ancient wisdom into the soil of Avalon itself? This mystery speaks to something deep within us, the human desire to find pattern and meaning, to connect our world to the cosmos. It invites us to look beyond the surface and question everything we think we know about this ancient corner of England. So join me on a journey of discovery. We will walk these fields, trace these patterns, and hear the arguments from both believers and skeptics. We will explore the strange alignments, the historical clues, and the powerful sense of wonder this idea inspires. This is more than just a historical investigation. It's a chance to see the world through different eyes, to feel the thrill of a secret that has captivated seekers for nearly a century. We're about to unravel the story of the Glastonbury Zodiac, to see if the legends hold truth, and to uncover what this hidden map might tell us about the people who may have shaped this land. This is a journey into one of history's greatest enigmas, and it all starts right here with a single, breathtaking view of the English countryside. Our story begins not with an archaeologist's trowel, but with an artist's eye. In the early 1920s, a remarkable woman named Katherine Maltwood was commissioned to illustrate a new edition of the Arthurian romances, the high tales of King Arthur and his knights. As she pored over the ancient texts, particularly the stories of the quest for the Holy Grail, she began to notice something extraordinary. The descriptions of the knights' adventures, with their strange encounters and symbolic landscapes, seemed to map perfectly onto the actual geography surrounding Glastonbury. She wasn't just reading stories, she believed she was deciphering a hidden map. Maltwood, a respected sculptor and a member of the Royal British Society of Artists, was also deeply interested in spiritualism and theosophy, belief systems that explore the hidden connections between all things. This unique combination of artistic sensibility and esoteric interest equipped her with a perspective that few conventional historians possessed. She started to spend countless hours studying Ordnance Survey maps, the highly detailed maps of the British landscape. And it was from this bird's eye view, piecing together the shapes formed by ancient roads, river courses, and field boundaries, that a breathtaking vision unfolded before her. She didn't see random features, she saw immense interlocking figures: a lion, a bull, a pair of fishes, each one spanning miles across the Somerset levels. She believed she had discovered a vast terrestrial zodiac, a celestial clock frozen in the earth, and that the Grail legends were actually an allegorical guide to navigating this sacred landscape. In 1935, after more than a decade of meticulous research, Katherine Maltwood formally introduced her theory to the world in a privately published booklet titled Glastonbury's Temple of the Stars. Her work was detailed, identifying all 12 signs of the zodiac laid out in a great circle with Glastonbury Tor at its heart. She described how the figure of Sagittarius was formed by a combination of the River Kerry and old trackways, and how the phoenix, a bird of rebirth, was outlined by drainage rinds on the levels. For Maltwood, this was not a coincidence. She proposed that this gigantic effigy was the work of a highly advanced prehistoric civilization, possibly Sumerian colonists, who had encoded their astronomical knowledge into the land itself thousands of years ago. This, she argued, was the true temple of the stars that legends spoke of, a sacred site far older and more significant than anyone had previously imagined. Unsurprisingly, the academic establishment of the time met her revelations with profound skepticism and often with outright dismissal. Here was a woman, an artist and a mystic, making a colossal claim that challenged the entire understanding of British prehistory, and she was doing it not through traditional excavation, but through map reading and intuitive interpretation. Archaeologists pointed out the lack of physical evidence, no tools, no settlements, no pottery, that could definitively link the natural and man-made features to a single, coordinated project of such immense scale. They argued that the human mind is exceptionally good at finding patterns, even where none exist, a phenomenon known as pareidolia, like seeing shapes in clouds. To them, Maltwood was simply connecting random dots, projecting her own imaginative interpretations onto the passive landscape. This clash between intuitive vision and empirical proof lies at the very core of the Glastonbury Zodiac mystery, a debate that continues to this day. Was Katherine Maltwood a brilliant visionary who uncovered a lost secret, or was she a product of her time, seeing what she desperately wanted to see? Her legacy, however, was undeniable. She had planted a seed, a tantalizing idea that would capture the imagination of countless others, ensuring that the question of the zodiac would not fade quietly into obscurity. So if a terrestrial zodiac sounds like a fantastical idea, let's break down exactly what we mean by this term. Think of the zodiac we all know, the one you see in a newspaper horoscope. That system is based on constellations, groups of stars that form patterns as seen from Earth. For ancient cultures, these star patterns were more than just pretty lights, they were a cosmic calendar. The Sun, in its annual journey, appears to pass through these 12 constellations, marking the seasons and guiding agricultural cycles and religious festivals. Now, a landscape zodiac takes that celestial concept and brings it down to Earth, literally. It's the theory that a civilization might have deliberately shaped its environment by building earthworks, digging canals, or aligning roads and field boundaries so that when viewed from a high vantage point or from the air, the land itself forms gigantic images representing those same 12 zodiac signs. Instead of looking up at the stars, you would be looking down at a massive, symbolic map of the heavens inscribed upon the ground. This transforms the land into something profoundly sacred. It becomes a giant astronomical clock. Imagine standing at the center of this great circle. As the sun moves through the celestial zodiac overhead, its light would interact with the terrestrial figures on the ground below. Perhaps the rising sun on the spring equinox would first illuminate the form of Aries the ram, or the shadow of a specific hill would fall perfectly across the shape of Leo the lion at a pivotal moment in the year. This creates a direct, experiential link between the macrocosm of the sky and the microcosm of the earth. It's a concept found in various ancient traditions, the idea of as above, so below. The land is no longer just a place to live. It is a living temple, a physical representation of cosmic order and mythological beliefs. For the people who might have created it, walking through this landscape would have been like walking through their own cosmology, a daily reminder of their connection to the universe. This idea stands in stark contrast to how we typically view ancient sites. We are used to studying individual monuments, a single stone circle like Stonehenge, or a solitary burial mound. A landscape zodiac, however, proposes a shift in perspective from the specific site to the entire region. It suggests a coordinated, long-term plan that treats hundreds of square miles as a single canvas. The scale is what is so mind-boggling. Constructing something on this order wouldn't be the work of a single chieftain or even a single generation. It would require a shared cultural vision sustained over centuries. This isn't just about creating a symbol to be admired. It's about weaving that symbol into the very fabric of existence, making the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars an inseparable part of the lived environment. It posits a level of geographical and astronomical sophistication that challenges our conventional understanding of prehistoric societies, suggesting they may have possessed knowledge and organizational skills far greater than we've credited them with. To truly grasp the ambition of this idea, we need to map out this celestial menagerie in its entirety. Picture a great circle roughly 10 miles in diameter, centered on the iconic Glastonbury tour. This isn't a small area. We're talking about a vast expanse of countryside, a domain of over 70 square miles encompassing towns like Street and Wells and sweeping across the Somerset levels. Within this immense circle, the theory proposes that 12 gigantic figures are laid out, each one formed by a combination of natural topography and ancient human alterations, hills, rivers, old trackways, and field boundaries that, when viewed from above, coalesce into familiar shapes. Starting in the east where the sun rises, you would find Aries the ram. Moving counterclockwise around the circle, you would encounter Taurus the bull, then Gemini the twins. Further along the circle's edge lies Cancer the crab, followed by the majestic figure of Leo the lion. Then comes Virgo the virgin, often associated with the direction of the tour itself, Libra the scales, and the mysterious Scorpio. Completing the celestial wheel are Sagittarius the archer, Capricorn the sea goat, Aquarius the water bearer, and finally Pisces the fishes. Each of these figures is said to be monumental in scale, some stretching for 2 or 3 miles from end to end. It's a breathtaking proposal, the entire region transformed into a star chart, with Glastonbury at its heart acting as the spiritual axis mundi, the center of this earthly universe. This overview gives us the framework, the grand design we will be exploring. But to understand the compelling and controversial nature of this theory, we must zoom in and examine a few of these figures up close to see how the land is interpreted to form these ancient symbols. To understand how this theory translates from grand concept to tangible geography, let's journey to the southern edge of the zodiac circle, to the low-lying lands surrounding the historic village of Machelny. This area, often waterlogged and rich with history, is where proponents of the zodiac see one of its most striking and unusual figures. According to Katherine Maltwood's interpretation, this is not the form of a centaur with a bow, as a classical Sagittarius might suggest, but something even more powerful and symbolic, a giant phoenix, the mythical bird of resurrection. This association is a key aspect of the mystery, blending classical zodiac symbolism with deeper, more local mythological threads. The entire figure is said to be immense, its wingspan covering a significant portion of the landscape, and it is primarily defined by the waterways that have shaped this region for millennia. The River Isle, a quiet but persistent flow winding through the Somerset levels, is seen as the central spine of the bird, forming its long, elegant body. From this main channel, smaller tributaries and drainage channels, known locally as rhines, branch off in graceful curves. These watercourses are interpreted as the phoenix's expansive wings, unfurled across the flat terrain as if in mid-flight. Ancient trackways, some following raised causeways that have kept feet dry for centuries, trace the outlines of the bird's neck and head, with a specific bend in a road or the curve of a field boundary suggesting the distinctive beak of the phoenix. What makes this interpretation so compelling to believers is the way these natural and human-made features seem to converge with a purpose that feels beyond mere coincidence. From a high vantage point or when tracing the lines on a map, the collection of water and land does appear to coalesce into a coherent, avian shape, an image of a bird rising from the watery landscape. The choice of a phoenix for this segment of the zodiac is deeply significant. The phoenix is a universal symbol of death and rebirth, cyclically consumed by fire only to rise again from its own ashes, renewed and transformed. This symbolism resonates powerfully with the very nature of the Somerset levels. This is a landscape that has undergone its own perpetual cycle of death and rebirth. For centuries, it was a vast marshland, a watery wilderness that was both a barrier and a resource. Through extensive human effort, it was drained and reclaimed for agriculture, effectively being reborn as fertile farmland. Furthermore, the village of Muchelney itself translates from Old English as Great Island, and for much of its history, it was exactly that, an island of habitation rising from the surrounding floods. The image of the phoenix, then, rising from the waters, becomes a perfect metaphor for the enduring spirit of this place and its people, constantly renewing itself against the elements. But why would a phoenix represent Sagittarius? This is where the theory delves into more esoteric connections. In some mystical traditions, Sagittarius, the archer, is associated with the quest for higher knowledge and spiritual aspiration, the arrow aiming for the heavens. The phoenix, in its cyclical rebirth, symbolizes the triumph of the spirit over mortality, the ultimate goal of that quest. By placing the phoenix here, the hypothetical creators of the zodiac may have been encoding a local mythos into a universal astrological framework, creating a layered meaning specific to this sacred geography. It suggests that walking through this part of the landscape, or perhaps performing rituals aligned with the position of the sun in Sagittarius, would have been an act of connecting with themes of transformation and eternal renewal. This intricate weaving of symbol and place is what gives the Glastonbury Zodiac its enduring allure, inviting us to see the land not just as soil and water, but as a living storybook of cosmic principles. To the east of the rising phoenix, nestled in the landscape around the quiet town of Langport, lies another colossal figure that shifts the celestial narrative from mythic birds to loyal guardians. This is the form interpreted by many as the Great Dog, a massive canine shape sprawled across the countryside. While Katherine Maltwood originally saw this as part of the larger Cancer the Crab configuration, other researchers have proposed a more independent and striking identity, linking it directly to the brilliant constellation Canis Major, the Great Dog, which follows the hunter Orion across the night sky. This connection adds another fascinating layer, suggesting the zodiac may incorporate not just the standard 12 signs, but also other significant celestial patterns, creating an even more complex cosmic map. The geography that forms this animal is both subtle and imposing. The dog's powerful body is primarily defined by the gentle, rolling contours of Aula Hill and its surrounding ridges, natural elevations that give the creature its substantial bulk. Old, sunken lanes and ancient trackways, worn deep into the earth by centuries of use, trace the outlines of its legs and tail, suggesting a creature in motion. A particular curve in a road or a specific field boundary near Hewish Episcopi is often identified as the dog's distinctively shaped head, pointed attentively towards the south. What makes this figure particularly convincing to some is the presence of a natural spring or well, frequently seen as representing the dog's eye, a tiny but poignant detail that seems to animate the entire form. From an aerial perspective, these features coalesce into the unmistakable silhouette of a resting yet watchful hound, a permanent sentinel carved into the very bones of the land. This image of a giant dog etched into the earth taps directly into a deep and enduring vein of British folklore, The spectral black dog, or barghest, is a recurring apparition across the UK, often seen as an omen of death or a guardian of ancient tracks. In Somerset, this legend feels especially potent. Stories of the Girt Dog, a benevolent but massive phantom hound said to roam the Quantock Hills, resonate strongly with the Langport figure. This folkloric connection bridges the gap between a hypothetical ancient monument and living local tradition, implying that the memory of this terrestrial guardian persisted long after its original purpose was forgotten, transforming into the spectral hounds of village tales. It suggests that the landscape itself, through its shape, might have inspired the stories that generations have told around hearth fires. Delving further back, we find even richer mythological threads. In Celtic mythology, dogs were sacred animals associated with healing, guidance, and protection. The Irish hero Cú Chulainn, whose name means Hound of Culan, was bound by a geas, a sacred vow tied to dogs. The god Nodens, worshipped at a temple in nearby Lydney on the Severn estuary, was often depicted with dogs as his companions, symbols of restorative power. Viewing the Langport dog through this lens transforms it from a simple shape into a potential representation of a divine protector. Its position on the landscape, facing outward, could be interpreted as a spiritual guardian for the entire zodiac circle, a divine hound warding off malevolent influences from the sacred space centered on Glastonbury Tor. Whether seen as a component of Cancer, a representation of Canis Major, or a standalone guardian spirit, the Great Dog of Langport embodies the mysterious interplay of land, sky, and story that makes the Glastonbury Zodiac such a captivating enigma. Moving westward from the guardian dog, the land begins to rise gently, and here the Zodiac presents one of its most geographically distinct and symbolically puzzling figures. Near the village of Butley, a series of long, low ridges and carefully aligned field boundaries are said to form the unmistakable shape of a great ship, its prow pointing determinedly towards the southwest. This isn't one of the standard 12 signs, but rather a representation of the vast ancient constellation known as Argo Navis, the ship of the Argonauts from Greek myth. While modern astronomers have since divided this sprawling star group into smaller constellations like Carina, Puppis, and Vela, the original concept was of a single, magnificent celestial vessel sailing the Milky Way. The idea that this cosmic ship found an echo in the Somerset soil is a fascinating departure, suggesting the creators of the Zodiac may have been mapping a broader celestial panorama. The topography itself makes a compelling case. A central ridge crowned by a quiet lane forms the ship's keel, a strong backbone running for over a mile. Smaller tracks and hedgerows branch off this central line, creating the subtle curves of the hull. At the vessel's front, the land contours and a meeting of pathways suggest a raised prow cutting through the terrestrial sea of fields. At the stern, the features are interpreted as a high, curved stern post. From an aerial perspective, the arrangement does evoke the image of a longboat or an ancient galley, seemingly resting on the hillside. It's a figure defined more by human alteration than natural watercourses, a network of boundaries and roads that feel, to believers, intentionally arranged. The location adds to the intrigue, for this is a ship placed decidedly inland, far from the modern coastline, resting on dry ground. This placement raises a profound symbolic question. What is a ship doing here, so far from the sea? One compelling interpretation is that it represents a vessel of spiritual passage. In mythology across the world, ships are common metaphors for the soul's journey. The Egyptian sun god Ra traveled the sky in a solar bark, and in Norse beliefs, the dead were sometimes buried in ships to carry them to the afterlife. Glastonbury's own mythology is deeply intertwined with water. In ancient times, before the levels were drained, the Tor would have risen from a vast inland sea or marsh, appearing as a true island, an Avalon accessible only by boat. This terrestrial ship, then, could symbolize the means to traverse that symbolic watery landscape, carrying initiates or the spirits of the dead from the mundane world to the sacred Isle of Avalon. It becomes a permanent reminder of a metaphysical journey anchored eternally in the landscape. Another possibility connects the ship to a deep ancestral memory. Centuries before the Romans arrived, the Somerset levels were home to lake villages, communities living on artificial islands in the wetlands, for whom boats and canoes were essential for survival, trade, and communication. Furthermore, the region has evidence of prehistoric trade routes, with goods moving along rivers and coastal waters. The people who inhabited this land, even if not deep-sea sailors themselves, would have understood the importance of vessels. The Argo Navis figure could be a monumental homage to that heritage, a celebration of the craft that connected them to the wider world and sustained their unique way of life. It transforms the ship from a purely spiritual symbol into a tribute to human ingenuity and connection. This blend of the practical and the mystical is a hallmark of the Zodiac theory, where every figure seems to hold multiple layers of meaning, waiting to be unlocked by those who walk the land with open eyes and an inquisitive mind. But perhaps the most commanding and visually striking of all the proposed figures lies to the north, centered on a place with the wonderfully evocative name of Wag Drove. Here, the theory presents the king of the celestial beasts, the great lion, Leo. This is often cited as one of the most convincing and clearly defined forms in the entire zodiac, a figure of immense power and presence etched into the flat Somerset landscape. Its creation relies on a fascinating interplay between natural geography and human engineering. The lion's most prominent feature, its magnificent mane, is said to be outlined by a series of old, curved drainage channels and field boundaries near the village of Westonzoyland. These watery lines and raised banks create a radiating, circular pattern that strongly suggests a ruff of fur. The creature's powerful body and back are formed by a long, low ridge, a subtle but distinct elevation in the otherwise flat levels. And in a particularly clever piece of interpretation, a straight, ancient trackway known as a drove road, a path used for centuries to herd livestock, extends from this body to form the lion's long, trailing tail. From an aerial view, these elements come together to create a stunningly coherent image of a reclining lion, its head turned as if gazing across its domain, a majestic guardian in a land of water and sky. The presence of such a potent symbol raises an immediate and fascinating question. Lions have not roamed the British Isles for thousands of years, since long before the era of any known large-scale landscape engineering. So why would a non-native animal, one that would have been entirely alien to the daily experience of ancient Britons, be given such a prominent place in their sacred geography? The answer lies not in the zoology of the time, but in the power of celestial symbolism. The constellation Leo has always been one of the most recognizable and significant patterns in the night sky. In many ancient cultures, it was associated with the sun itself because in the northern hemisphere, the sun resides in the part of the sky dominated by Leo during the hottest, most vital part of the year, high summer. The lion, therefore, became a universal symbol of royalty, strength, and the fierce, life-giving power of the sun. By embedding this cosmic king into the earth, the creators of the zodiac would have been making a profound statement about the nature of this land, consecrating it as a place where the sun's supreme power was anchored and honored. This celestial connection finds a powerful echo in later British tradition. While the lion may not have been a physical resident of Britain, it became the ultimate symbol of royal authority and national identity. Look at the British coat of arms with its proud lion's passant guardant. This heraldic use didn't emerge from a vacuum. It drew upon a long-standing mythological understanding of the lion as the king of beasts, a symbol of courage and sovereignty that transcended local fauna. The figure at Wag Drove suggests this symbolic association may have incredibly deep roots predating heraldry by millennia. It posits that the concept of the lion as a regal emblem was not a medieval import, but could have been part of a much older, sophisticated cosmological system shared by the people who shaped this land. They may have known the lion not as an animal of the field, but as a celestial power, and they chose to represent that power on a scale befitting its importance. Beyond kingship, the lion also carries profound mythological weight, particularly in the context of Glastonbury's own legendary history. In the story of the quest for the Holy Grail, which Katherine Maltwood was illustrating when she first conceived of the Zodiac, one of the knights often faces a test involving a fierce lion. In these tales, the lion can symbolize raw, untamed strength that must be overcome or harnessed on the spiritual journey. It represents the challenges of the material world that the seeker must conquer to achieve enlightenment. Placing the lion in the landscape could have served as a permanent symbolic representation of this stage of the quest. A pilgrim moving through the zodiac would literally walk into the domain of the lion, confronting its symbolic power physically and spiritually. This transforms the entire theory from a simple star map into an interactive spiritual landscape, a giant labyrinth where each figure represents a different test or lesson on a path toward the sacred center at Glastonbury Tor. The lion, then, is not just a picture in the dirt, it is a challenge, a guardian of a threshold, whose very presence asks a timeless question of those who would seek the mysteries of Avalon. Now, after encountering the kingly lion and the mystical ship, our exploration of the zodiac brings us to its most spiritually resonant figure, one that lies at the very heart of the Glastonbury legend. In the northwestern segment of the Great Circle, centered on the town of Street, the landscape is said to form the shape not of the traditional water-bearer, but of a woman holding a cup or chalice. This powerful reinterpretation of Aquarius seamlessly merges celestial symbolism with the foundational myth of this land, the quest for the Holy Grail. It is here that the idea of the zodiac transcends being a mere map of the stars and becomes a narrative landscape, a terrain where myth and geography are indivisible. The figure is seen as a reclining female form, with her head near the village of Walton, her body outlined by the gentle curves of the River Brew and Old Field systems, and her arms gracefully holding a cup aloft. This is no abstract symbol, it is the goddess of the land offering the sacred vessel, a direct invitation into the mysteries that have drawn seekers to Glastonbury for centuries. The connection to the Grail legends is immediate and profound. Glastonbury has long been identified as the Isle of Avalon, the mythical resting place of King Arthur, and the ultimate destination of the quest for the Holy Grail, the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper and later, in legend, to collect his blood at the crucifixion. In the Arthurian romances, the Grail is not just a physical object but a symbol of divine grace, spiritual fulfillment, and the healing of the wounded land. The knight Percival or Galahad must prove their purity of heart to even glimpse it. By depicting a goddess figure holding a chalice directly within the landscape, the zodiac theory suggests that the entire quest was an allegory for navigating this sacred geography. The spiritual journey of the knights becomes a physical pilgrimage where the ultimate goal, encountering the Grail, is achieved by finding one's way to this specific part of the land, to the symbolic cup held by the earth itself. This interpretation finds its most tangible and powerful anchor at the Chalice Well, one of Glastonbury's most beloved and enduring sites. Nestled at the foot of the Tor, this ancient spring has flowed with iron-rich red water for thousands of years, its rust-colored stain evocative of blood and thus the Grail legend. The well's name directly links it to the chalice, with local tradition claiming that Joseph of Arimathea, the biblical figure who buried Jesus, journeyed to Glastonbury and hid the Holy Grail here, causing the spring to flow. Proponents of the zodiac see the chalice well not as a separate entity, but as the actual cup in the hand of the giant Aquarian goddess figure. The well becomes the focal point, the sacred heart of the entire symbol, where the spiritual concept of the Grail manifests as a physical, life-giving source of water. This creates a breathtaking synthesis. The celestial sign of Aquarius, the water-bearer, is re-envisioned as a local goddess offering the waters of life from the chalice well, seamlessly blending astrology, Arthurian romance, and the tangible reality of a flowing spring. The symbolism deepens when we consider the nature of Aquarius itself. While commonly associated with pouring water in esoteric traditions, Aquarius represents the bearer of spiritual knowledge, the dispenser of the waters of enlightenment that awaken humanity. The chalice, across countless cultures, is a vessel for receiving this kind of divine wisdom and grace. By combining these symbols into a single figure, the landscape becomes a profound statement. Enlightenment is not something to be sought only in the heavens, but is present here on earth, offered freely by the goddess of the land to those who approach with reverence. Walking into this part of the zodiac would have been, for an ancient pilgrim, an act of stepping into the domain of ultimate spiritual blessing. It suggests that the creators of this giant effigy were not just astronomers but mystics, encoding their deepest spiritual understanding into the very contours of their home, ensuring that every hill and stream would forever tell the story of the quest for wholeness and the promise of divine connection that lies at the end of that journey. Among the rolling hills to the northeast of Glastonbury, the zodiac presents a figure that embodies one of the most fundamental concepts in human thought, the principle of duality. This is the realm of Gemini, the twins, and its proposed earthly counterpart offers a fascinatingly abstract interpretation compared to the animal and human forms we have encountered. Here, the landscape does not suggest a single, coherent shape, but rather a relationship between two distinct yet parallel features. Proponents of the zodiac theory point to two prominent, roughly parallel ridges that run across this part of the countryside, perhaps the most notable being the line of hills that includes the iconic Glastonbury Tor itself and another ridge running alongside it. Alternatively, some interpretations focus on the positioning of two ancient settlements or hill forts that face each other across a valley, their placement creating a sense of mirrored presence. It is this pairing, this mirrored relationship in the topography, that is said to represent the celestial twins. The genius of this interpretation is that it captures the essence of Gemini not through a literal depiction of two figures holding hands, but through the architectural grammar of the land itself, using symmetry and partnership to convey a complex idea. This theme of duality resonates on a profoundly mythological level. The constellation Gemini is traditionally associated with the twin brothers Castor and Pollux from Greek mythology, one mortal and one immortal, representing the inseparable bond between the earthly and the divine, the transient and the eternal. This celestial story finds a powerful echo in the very nature of Glastonbury's identity. The town is, in a sense, a place of twins. There is the physical Glastonbury we can touch with its soil and stones, and there is the mythical Avalon, a realm of legend and spirit that exists in the collective imagination. The Tor itself acts as a bridge between these two worlds, a physical hill that is simultaneously regarded as a gateway to the other world. By encoding the sign of the twins into the landscape, the hypothetical creators may have been making a profound statement about the dual nature of this entire sacred territory, a place where heaven and earth meet, where the mundane and the magical coexist. This concept extends into the rhythmic patterns of the sky, offering a potential astronomical function for this terrestrial marker. The sun's annual journey provides a spectacular demonstration of duality, particularly around the times of the solstices. At the summer solstice, the sun rises at its most northeasterly point on the horizon, and at the winter solstice, it rises at its most southeasterly point. To an ancient observer tracking these extreme points, the sun would appear to have two distinct homes or stations. Some researchers have suggested that the two ridges or points identified as the Gemini figure could have been used as alignment markers for observing these solstitial sunrises or sunsets. One ridge might align with the summer solstice sunrise, while its twin aligns with the winter solstice sunrise. In this practical sense, the twins in the landscape would literally be tracking the twin peaks of the solar year, anchoring the cosmic cycle of light and dark, growth and decay into the permanent features of the Earth. The land itself becomes a celestial clock, with the Gemini configuration acting as a fundamental gear in its mechanism. Local folklore adds another rich layer to this interpretation. While not directly featuring twin brothers, the area is steeped in tales that explore themes of pairing and opposition. Stories of fairy kingdoms existing alongside the human world, or of spectral battles between forces of light and shadow played out on the slopes of the Tor, reflect a deep-seated understanding of the landscape as a place of balanced opposites. The very name Glastonbury is sometimes thought to derive from a Celtic root meaning green place of the ghosts, again suggesting a world where the living and the dead, the seen and the unseen, are close neighbors. The terrestrial Gemini can be seen as a monumental expression of this worldview, a silent testament to the ancient belief that life is a dance of complementary forces, and that here, in this special corner of England, that dance was made visible in the very shape of the hills. It reminds us that the mystery of the Glastonbury Zodiac is not just about seeing pictures in the land, but about understanding the profound ideas those pictures were meant to convey. Turning our attention to the eastern reaches of the Great Circle brings us to one of the most physically imposing figures in the entire zodiac, the Great Bull of Taurus, a creature of immense power said to be stamped into the land around the historic town of Somerset. Here, the theory moves from watery channels and subtle ridges to a geography of clear, forceful presence. The bull's massive body is defined by the substantial bulk of a hill known as Liat's Hill, a natural prominence that gives the creature its weight and solidity. From this central form, two distinct curving ridges sweep outward, interpreted as the bull's formidable horns. These landforms, one pointing toward the village of Kingston and the other toward Charlton Mackerel, are not subtle suggestions. They are bold, sweeping gestures in the landscape, creating a silhouette that, from an aerial perspective, powerfully evokes the head of a charging bull. The creature's neck and shoulders are traced by ancient trackways and the contours of smaller hills, completing the image of a beast both grounded and dynamic, a permanent embodiment of raw, earthly strength. This connection to a bull is far more than just a convenient shape. It resonates with archaeological findings that point to the profound significance of cattle in prehistoric Britain. Evidence from the Neolithic and Bronze Ages reveals that bulls were not merely sources of food and labor, but held a central place in ritual and spiritual life. At sites like the Great Henge of Avebury, archaeologists have uncovered bull skulls carefully placed in ceremonial deposits. In the famous cave paintings of Lascaux in France, though not in Britain, the towering figure of a bull demonstrates the deep cross-cultural awe these animals inspired. For early farming communities, the bull represented the ultimate symbol of fertility, vitality, and untamed nature, the crucial power that ensured the continuation of the herd and, by extension, the survival of the people. To monumentalize such a creature in the landscape would be to invoke and honor that essential life force, binding it permanently to the territory. What makes the Somerset bull particularly compelling is the possibility that it points to a far more ancient origin for the zodiac complex than even Katherine Maltwood proposed. While she suggested a potential Sumerian connection from the Bronze Age, the prominence of a bull symbol raises the tantalizing prospect of a genesis in the even deeper past of the Neolithic period, a time when great monuments like Stonehenge and Avebury were first being conceived. This was an era of burgeoning astronomical knowledge and monumental earthworking. If communities were capable of moving multi-ton stones across vast distances, they certainly possessed the organizational skill and symbolic motivation to coordinate the shaping of a landscape over generations. The bull, as a symbol, stretches back to these earliest farming societies. This suggests the zodiac may not be the work of a single, lost civilization, but rather a project that evolved over millennia, with its foundational symbols like the bull being established in the Neolithic and later refined or incorporated into a more complex zodiacal system during the Bronze Age. It transforms the theory from a static blueprint into a living, evolving sacred geography. The location of the bull adds another layer of meaning. Positioned in the east of the zodiac circle, Taurus is the constellation through which the sun passes during the peak of spring, a time of rebirth, planting, and explosive fertility in the natural world. To have the terrestrial bull placed in the corresponding eastern sector of the landscape creates a perfect symbolic alignment. As the sun rose in the celestial Taurus each spring, its light would fall upon this earthly representation, effectively charging the land with the bull's fertile energy. This would have turned the entire region into a giant seasonal clock and a spiritual battery, where the cosmic event was mirrored and amplified on the ground. For the people living within this great circle, the coming of spring would not just be observed in the sky. It would be physically experienced as a reawakening of the bull's power in their very fields and hills, a direct participatory connection between the cycles of the heavens and the vitality of the earth beneath their feet. Journeying to the southeastern edge of the great zodiac circle, we encounter a figure that is arguably the most complex and symbolically layered of them all. This is the domain of Capricorn, but not as a simple goat. The traditional representation is the sea goat, a mythical hybrid with the head and upper body of a goat and the tail of a fish. It's a creature that embodies two opposing realms, the earthy, mountainous domain of the goat and the fluid, unconscious depths of the sea. Interpreting this duality in the landscape requires a keen eye, and proponents point to the area surrounding the villages of Compton Dundon and Dundon Hill. Here, the geography itself seems to tell a story of transition. The sturdy, prominent form of Dundon Hill, with its ancient earthworks, is seen as the goat's forequarters, the solid, climbing aspect of the creature. From this high ground, the land then slopes down towards the Somerset levels, where a network of old drainage channels and watercourses, glistening like veins across the flat terrain, are interpreted as forming the fish-like tail. This merging of a distinct hill with the watery plains below creates a powerful visual representation of the sea goat, a permanent symbol of connection between the heights and the depths. This strange hybrid creature holds profound astrological significance. Capricorn is the sign of the winter solstice, the point in the year when the sun, after reaching its lowest ebb, begins its slow climb back towards the light. The goat part of the symbol represents this upward climb, ambition, and material achievement, while the fish tail signifies the hidden wisdom and spiritual potential that must be drawn upon to make that ascent. It is a symbol of resurrection in the depths of winter, of finding strength in darkness. This cyclical theme of death and rebirth finds a stunningly direct parallel in one of the most central myths of the Arthurian cycle, which Katherine Maltwood believed was encoded into this very landscape, the legend of the Fisher King. In the Grail romances, the Fisher King is the guardian of the Holy Grail, but he is wounded, often in the thigh, an injury that renders him impotent. His personal affliction is mirrored in his kingdom, which becomes a barren wasteland, a blighted land where crops fail and waters stagnate. The kingdom and the king are one. His spiritual malaise manifests as physical desolation in the world around him. The connection to the Capricorn landscape becomes electrifying when we consider the geography. The Somerset levels, which form the fishtail of the sea goat, are a land that has historically battled blight in a very literal sense. Before extensive drainage, this was a vast, often flooded marsh, a territory that could easily be perceived as a wasteland, yet one holding the potential for immense fertility. The Fisher King's castle is often described as situated on a river or near water, much like the hill forts that overlook these levels. The wounded king fishes in the waters surrounding his castle, a poignant image of engaging with the very source of the land's stagnation. In this context, the Capricorn figure can be seen as a monumental representation of the Fisher King's domain. The wounded king is the sea goat. His earthly power, the goat, is crippled, leaving him connected only to the watery, unconscious, and stagnant realm, the fish tail. The entire landscape becomes a symbol of his affliction and the potential for his healing. The resolution of the myth provides the key to the symbol's ultimate meaning. The blighted land can only be restored when a pure-hearted knight like Percival or Galahad arrives at the castle and asks the correct question, often simply, "Whom does the Grail serve?" This act of compassionate inquiry heals the king and restores fertility to the land. This quest for healing is mirrored in the solar cycle. At the winter solstice, when the sun is in Capricorn, it is at its weakest, like the wounded king. But this moment also contains the seed of its own salvation. As the days begin to grow longer, the quest of the Grail Knight, then, is an allegory for the sun's journey out of the darkness of winter. By navigating the zodiac landscape and reaching the Capricorn sector, a pilgrim would be symbolically reenacting this healing journey, participating in the cosmic drama that restores life to the world. The land itself, through the figure of the sea-goat, becomes a permanent reminder that from the deepest depths, whether of winter, despair, or the unconscious mind, arises the potential for ascent, healing, and renewal, making the entire zodiac not just a map of the stars, but a guidebook for the human soul. But if the zodiac is a guide to the soul's journey, then the path must inevitably lead to a place of judgment and equilibrium. Moving clockwise from the introspective depths of the Capricorn sea-goat, we arrive at a figure that stands in stark contrast to the mythical hybrids and animal forms, the balanced scales of Libra. Positioned to the west of the Glastonbury Tor, this sign is not represented by a living creature but by an object, an instrument of measurement, and its proposed earthly form is as elegantly simple as the concept it embodies. Proponents of the zodiac theory point to the area around the village of Godney, where the landscape presents a natural and remarkably precise example of symmetry. Here, the river Sheppey does not meander randomly. Instead, it splits into two main channels that flow in parallel for a significant distance, creating a perfect natural fork. These two waterways, balanced on either side of a central point, are seen as the two arms of the scales. The pans of the scales themselves are often identified as two small, rounded hills or mounds of very similar size and shape that sit adjacent to these water channels. From above, the arrangement suggests a perfectly balanced set of scales, an instrument of justice laid out upon the green fields of Somerset, its equilibrium maintained by the relentless, equal flow of the rivers. The choice of a symbol representing balance and justice is deeply significant in a landscape otherwise populated by powerful animals and mythical beings. Libra is the only sign of the zodiac that is an inanimate object, shifting the focus from primal instinct or spiritual quest to the realm of intellect, law, and harmony. In ancient astrology, Libra, ruled by the planet Venus, was associated with partnership, fairness, diplomacy, and the quest for beauty and equilibrium in all things. It represents the moment of the autumnal equinox, when day and night are of equal length, a temporary but perfect state of balance in the cosmic cycle. By embedding this symbol into the land, the creators of the zodiac may have been making a profound philosophical statement, that the universe operates on a fundamental principle of balance, and that this principle is not just a celestial idea but a terrestrial reality. The land itself becomes a teacher, demonstrating that justice and harmony are as inherent to the natural order as the rising sun or the flowing river. This concept of cosmic balance resonates powerfully with the broader purpose that believers attribute to the entire zodiac complex. If the figures represent stages on a spiritual journey, a pilgrim moving from the raw power of the lion to the transformative quest for the Grail, then the scales of Libra would represent a crucial waypoint. It is the point of judgment and reflection where the actions and intentions of the seeker are weighed. Before one can proceed to the more intense, transformative signs like Scorpio, one must pass through this zone of equilibrium. It suggests that the path to enlightenment requires a balanced soul, one that has reconciled its own inner conflicts and achieved a state of inner justice. The landscape, therefore, becomes more than a map. It becomes an interactive moral compass where walking into the domain of the scales would have been a powerful ritual act of self-assessment, a preparation for the trials to come. This interpretation finds a fascinating echo in the local history and the very practical challenges of living in this unique environment. The Somerset levels are a landscape that has demanded balance for its very survival. For centuries, communities living here engaged in a constant, delicate negotiation with water, building drainage systems and flood defenses to maintain the equilibrium between dry land and marsh, between cultivation and inundation. The management of water rights and land use would have required a strong sense of communal justice and fair measure concepts literally embodied by the scales. The location of the Libra figure, intricately connected to the waterways around Godney, could be seen as a monumental reminder of this practical necessity for balance and fair distribution. It grounds the lofty philosophical idea of cosmic justice in the everyday reality of survival, suggesting that the law of the heavens was also the practical law of the land. The scales, therefore, stand not just as a spiritual symbol, but as a testament to the ancient understanding that human society, like the cosmos itself, can only thrive when harmony is actively maintained. Yet as compelling as these figures of power and balance may be, our journey around the celestial circle now brings us to what many consider its spiritual and geographical heart. To the northwest of Glastonbury Tor, centered on the area known as Beckery, the landscape is said to form the figure of Virgo the Virgin, but this is no abstract constellation. It is interpreted as a vast, reclining goddess figure, her form gracefully outlined by the gentle contours of the land. Her head rests near the site of the ancient chapel of St. Bride. Her body flows along the curves of the River Brue, and her legs extend towards the slopes of Wiriol Hill. This is perhaps the most poignant of all the proposed figures, a terrestrial representation of the divine feminine that transforms the entire zodiac from an astronomical map into a testament to a profound and ancient spiritual tradition. The theory posits that this giant effigy is a monumental celebration of a mother goddess religion that thrived in Avalon long before the arrival of Christianity, a belief system that saw the earth itself as a living, sacred female being. This concept of a prehistoric goddess-centered religion is not unique to Glastonbury, but here it finds one of its most powerful potential expressions. Across Europe, archaeological finds from the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, statuettes of ample, fertile female forms, symbols of life, death, and regeneration, suggest that many early societies venerated a great mother goddess as the source of all creation. In the context of Glastonbury, a place intrinsically linked to ideas of fertility and the life-giving waters of the levels, this belief would have found a perfect home. The Virgo figure, etched into the very soil, can be seen as the ultimate representation of this deity, the goddess of the land herself. Her presence would have sanctified the entire area, making it not just a holy site but the body of the divine. Every harvest, every birth, every seasonal cycle would have been understood as a manifestation of her power, with the land and the goddess being one and the same. This ancient divine feminine seamlessly merges with one of the most enduring figures of British mythology, the Lady of the Lake. In the Arthurian legends, she is a mysterious and powerful figure, the keeper of Excalibur who bestows the sword upon Arthur and later receives it back when his life ends. She is the ruler of Avalon, a realm of magic and mystery that exists just beyond the veil of the ordinary world. The terrestrial Virgo figure offers a stunning geographical anchor for this myth. The low-lying land where the goddess's form is said to rest was before the drainage of the levels, largely underwater. The Lady of the Lake, therefore, quite literally would have been the Lady of the Lake. Her divine body was the island of Avalon itself, rising from the waters, and the surrounding marshes were the lake over which she presided. This interpretation bridges thousands of years of belief, suggesting that the Celtic and later Arthurian stories of a powerful water goddess are direct descendants of that much older Neolithic veneration of the land as a mother. The location of specific features within the Virgo figure adds layers of rich symbolism. The association of her head with the site dedicated to St. Bride is particularly significant. Saint Bridget, or Bride, is a Christian saint who famously inherited the attributes and festivals of the powerful Celtic goddess Brigid, a deity of fire, poetry, healing, and smithcraft. This is a classic example of the early church building its churches on pre-existing pagan sacred sites, effectively baptizing the old gods into the new faith. The presence of a St. Bride's chapel at the head of the terrestrial goddess suggests this was a place of supreme importance in the ancient landscape, a focal point of goddess worship that continued to be recognized as holy even as the dominant religion changed. It implies a continuous thread of reverence where the identity of the divine feminine evolved but her essential presence in the land remained constant. Furthermore, the positioning of the Virgo figure in relation to the Sun reinforces its cosmic significance. The Sun passes through the constellation Virgo in the late summer and early autumn, the time of the harvest. This is the point in the year when the Earth, the goddess, gives up her bounty. Having the terrestrial Virgo placed in the landscape creates a direct link between this celestial event and the agricultural reality on the ground. As the Sun journeyed through the celestial Virgin, its light would fall upon her earthly counterpart, symbolically fertilizing the land and ensuring a successful harvest. This turns the entire concept into a participatory ritual where the cosmos and the earth are in a sacred dialogue mediated by the figure of the goddess. For the people living within this great circle, their most vital seasonal activities would have been framed by this grand cosmological narrative, their survival intertwined with the sacred marriage of sun and earth. The Virgo figure, therefore, stands as a silent witness to a time when spirituality was not separate from daily life, but was instead woven into the very fabric of the world, a constant reminder of the divine presence in every field, river, and harvest. And so we come to the final figure in our celestial circle, a form that holds perhaps the most potent and challenging energy of them all. In the southwestern quadrant of the zodiac, the landscape takes on a shape that is both intricate and undeniably menacing, the Scorpion of Scorpio. This is not a gentle symbol of harvest or balance, but a creature of the dark, of hidden forces and necessary endings. The proposed formation is centered on an area known as Aula, a name that itself whispers of alder trees and old, wet places. Here, the curved course of the river Parrot is seen as the primary feature, forming the scorpion's powerful, segmented body and its famously arched tail, poised as if to deliver a fatal sting. Smaller streams and ancient trackways branching from the main river are interpreted as the creature's multiple legs, while a distinct bend or a confluence of waterways suggests the menacing claws. From above, the entire configuration creates a compelling image of a predator lying in wait, a permanent emblem of danger and transformation etched into the Somerset clay. This association with a creature of venom and sudden death immediately introduces the zodiac's most profound themes: mortality, dissolution, and the essential cycle of rebirth. In virtually every ancient tradition, the scorpion is a symbol of the underworld, a guardian of thresholds between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Its sting brings a swift end, but that end is never presented as a full stop. It is a transition, a necessary clearing away of the old to make space for the new. Scorpio, in astrological symbolism, is not about death for its own sake, but about the powerful transformation that true endings make possible. It represents the process of composting, where decay gives birth to new life, and the psychological death of the ego that must occur for spiritual enlightenment to dawn. By placing this formidable symbol in the landscape, the creators of the zodiac acknowledged a truth that modern society often tries to ignore. that death and rebirth are inseparable partners in the great dance of existence. This symbolic weight becomes startlingly tangible when we look at the archaeology of the area. The region around Aula and the proposed Scorpio figure is rich with evidence of ancient engagement with the dead. Just a short distance away lies the Sweet Track, one of the oldest known engineered roads in the world, built by Neolithic people nearly 6,000 years ago across the wetlands. While a road might seem utilitarian, its construction across a marsh suggests a journey, perhaps even a ceremonial passage associated with funeral rites, moving the deceased from the world of the living to a sacred island or burial ground. More directly, the nearby village of Aula itself is the site of a significant historical find, a Saxon boat burial. The discovery of a high-status individual interred within a ship echoes the ship burials of Sutton Hoo and Scandinavia, a practice rooted in the belief that a vessel was needed to carry the soul to the afterlife. The proximity of this burial site to the landscape feature interpreted as the Scorpion sting is a powerful coincidence, if it is a coincidence at all. It suggests that ancient peoples recognized this part of the land as intrinsically connected to the journey of the soul, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. This connection to the underworld is further reinforced by local mythology that resonates deeply with the Scorpio archetype. Glastonbury's own legends speak of Gwyn ap Nudd, a Celtic king of the fairies and lord of the underworld who is said to rule from the Tor. He was a psychopomp, a guide of souls, leading the dead to their resting place in Anon, the Celtic otherworld. The placement of the Scorpio figure in the landscape could be seen as marking the entrance to his domain, the point where one would symbolically leave the world of the living and enter the realm of transformation. Furthermore, the Arthurian cycle, so central to this mystery, contains its own Scorpio narrative in the form of the final, bloody Battle of Camlan, where Arthur is mortally wounded. While the location of Camlan is hotly debated, some traditions place it in Somerset. The Scorpion's sting is a perfect metaphor for the treacherous blow that brings down the once and future king, an ending that is simultaneously a tragedy and the necessary prelude to his legendary journey to Avalon to be healed. The land, through this symbol, encapsulates the entire myth, the fatal wound and the promise of eventual return. Ultimately, the Scorpio formation completes the Zodiac's grand narrative arc. If the entire circle is understood as a spiritual journey, then the pilgrim would begin with the raw, nascent energy of Aries and progress through trials of strength, balance, and introspection, finally arriving at the domain of the Scorpion. This is the ultimate test, the symbolic death of the old self that must occur before one can be reborn and return to the world transformed. The sting of the Scorpion is not merely a punishment, it is an initiation. It is the moment of shedding, of releasing everything that no longer serves, so that the essential spirit can emerge purified. By walking into this part of the landscape, an ancient seeker would have been confronting their own mortality, not with fear, but with the understanding that true power lies in the acceptance of life cycles. The Scorpio figure, therefore, is the dark, crucial heart of the Zodiac's message, a permanent reminder etched into the earth that from every ending springs a new beginning, and that the deepest transformations often arise from the most challenging encounters with the dark. Completing our circuit of this celestial menagerie brings us to a figure defined by the very element that shaped this land more than any other: water. In the northeastern segment of the Great Circle, where the Somerset levels merge with slightly higher ground, lies the proposed formation of Pisces the fishes. This sign, represented by two fish swimming in opposite directions yet bound together by a cord, finds a natural home in the labyrinthine waterways that crisscross this region. The interpretation often focuses on the intricate network of the River Brue and its many tributaries and drainage channels near the villages of Mere and Westhay. Here, the waterways themselves are seen as the two fish, their bodies formed by the main flows of the rivers, their tails and fins suggested by the curves of smaller streams and ancient field boundaries that follow the contours of the wetlands. The cord that connects them could be a long, straight trackway or a raised causeway that visually or symbolically links the two aquatic paths. In a landscape so intimately tied to water, the appearance of this particular zodiac symbol feels less like a projection and more like a recognition of the environment's essential nature. The symbolism of the fish holds a uniquely powerful and layered significance in the context of Glastonbury, creating a direct bridge between the ancient pagan world and the arrival of Christianity. Today, the fish is widely recognized as the ichthyes, a symbol used by early Christians as a secret sign of their faith. The word itself is an acronym for the Greek phrase, Isus Christos Theouios Soter, meaning Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. For believers, the fish represented spiritual sustenance and the act of being fishers of men. But this Christian adoption of the symbol was almost certainly a reinterpretation of a much older, more universal pagan motif. In countless pre-Christian cultures across Europe and the Near East, fish were potent symbols of fertility, abundance, and the mysterious, life-giving powers of the watery deep. They represented the subconscious, the flow of intuition, and the generative forces of nature itself. This older meaning resonates profoundly with the prehistoric reality of the Somerset levels. For the people who lived in the lake villages of Glastonbury, such as the famous site at Mere, fish were not a symbol, they were a cornerstone of survival. The waters teemed with pike, eels, and other species that provided a vital food source. The fish was therefore a direct representation of the goddess's bounty, a sacred creature that sustained life. To monumentalize the fish in the landscape would have been to pay homage to this essential source of nourishment and to the divine source that provided it. The two fish of Pisces bound together can be seen as representing the duality of this relationship, the tangible, physical sustenance the water provided and the intangible, spiritual mystery it embodied. This connection creates a fascinating continuity of belief that spans millennia. When Joseph of Arimathea, according to legend, arrived in Glastonbury, he is said to have thrust his staff into the ground on Wiriol Hill, where it miraculously took root and bloomed into the holy thorn tree. But earlier, more obscure versions of the story suggest he first came as a trader, possibly dealing in the tin and lead that were mined in the region. A traveler and merchant would have been intimately familiar with the sea and its creatures. It is easy to imagine early Christian missionaries, aware of the deep-seated local veneration for water and its life, adopting the fish symbol precisely because it would have been familiar and sacred to the indigenous population. They effectively baptized an ancient pagan emblem, layering their new message of salvation onto the old belief in the life-giving powers of the water goddess. The terrestrial Pisces figure, then, becomes a silent witness to this spiritual evolution, a place where the old faith and the new faith literally flow into one another. Beyond its religious symbolism, the Pisces configuration encapsulates the entire existential reality of the people who once inhabited this unique environment. The two fish swimming in opposite directions yet connected by a cord is a perfect metaphor for the human experience of living on the Somerset levels. Life here was a constant pull between opposites, between dry land and encroaching water, between safety and flood, between the island of high ground and the surrounding marsh. The community was bound together, like the two fish, by the shared challenge and blessing of their environment. The cord represents the social and spiritual bonds, the cooperative drainage efforts, and the shared myths that held them together against the elemental forces. To walk into this part of the zodiac would have been to enter a realm that reflected the fundamental rhythm of their lives, a rhythm of duality and connection, of navigating the delicate balance between two worlds. It serves as a final, graceful reminder that the Glastonbury Zodiac, if it exists, is not merely a picture of the stars, but a profound and poetic map of the human spirit, etched in water and earth. But as we move from the powerful flow of the fish to the quieter, more elusive figure of Cancer the crab, we encounter a segment of the zodiac that truly tests the limits of interpretation. Nestled in the landscape between the Langport dog and the rising phoenix, the proposed form of Cancer is often cited by skeptics as the weakest link in the celestial chain, a configuration that requires a significant leap of the imagination to perceive. Unlike the bold, sweeping lines of Leo or the distinct waterways of Pisces, Cancer presents a subtler, more fragmented picture. Proponents point to an area of gentle undulations and meandering watercourses near the village of Othery. Here, the curves of the river Parrot and some of its smaller tributaries are said to suggest the outstretched claws of the crab, while the body is formed by a series of low-lying mounds and the intricate patterns of field boundaries on the levels. The overall shape is less a coherent image and more a collection of suggestive curves, a sketch rather than a detailed etching. This subtlety makes Cancer a fascinating case study, highlighting the central tension in the entire zodiac theory, the fine line between recognizing a deliberate pattern and imposing one upon a passive landscape. This challenge gets to the very heart of the critical argument against Katherine Maltwood's vision. Psychologists have a term for our brain's tendency to find meaningful patterns in random stimuli, pareidolia. It's the same phenomenon that lets us see faces in the clouds or the man in the moon. Critics argue that the Glastonbury Zodiac is a spectacular, county-wide example of this innate human trait. They suggest that when you start with a predetermined idea, the 12 signs of the zodiac, and then overlay it onto a complex, ancient landscape rich with natural and human-made features, it's almost inevitable that you will find connections. The meander of a river here, the curve of a hedgerow there. Individually, these are just the accumulated results of geology, agriculture, and centuries of settlement. But when viewed through the lens of a sought-after pattern, they can be selectively joined together to form a desired shape. Cancer, with its lack of strong, defining lines, becomes a prime example of where the viewer must do most of the work, connecting the dots in a way that feels more subjective than objective. The debate, then, shifts from archaeology to the philosophy of perception. Is the zodiac a real, physical construction waiting to be discovered? Or is it a conceptual framework, a symbolic lens through which to view and understand a sacred landscape? Some modern proponents of the theory have moved away from the idea of a single, Bronze Age construction crew and towards this more nuanced view. They propose that the zodiac may not have been built in a conventional sense, but rather recognized. An ancient seer or a school of mystics deeply attuned to both the stars and the land might have perceived these natural resonances. They might have seen that the layout of the hills and rivers naturally echoed the celestial patterns above, and then, through generations, subtly enhanced these features, building a trackway to clarify a line, digging a rhine to emphasize a curve, to strengthen the cosmic correspondence. In this interpretation, Cancer isn't a failed attempt at a clear picture. It's a more subtle, intuitive part of the design, meant to be felt as much as seen, its very ambiguity inviting a deeper level of engagement from the pilgrim. This perspective finds a surprising ally in the symbolism of Cancer itself. In astrology, Cancer is a water sign associated with intuition, emotion, and the hidden depths of the unconscious mind. It is not a sign of bold, outward action but of subtle feeling and protective nurturing. Its ruling celestial body is the moon, which governs the tides and the rhythms of flux and reflux. Could it be that the subtlety of the terrestrial Cancer is intentional? If the landscape is indeed an interactive spiritual map, then each sign might reflect its own astrological nature. Entering the domain of Cancer would not be about confronting a giant, obvious crab, but about tuning into the more intuitive, fluid energies of the place. The very act of searching for the figure, of letting the eye trace the soft curves of the land, becomes a meditative practice aligned with Cancer's essence. The figure's elusiveness mirrors the elusive nature of intuition itself, teaching the seeker that not all truths are glaringly obvious. Some must be felt and patiently uncovered. This transforms what appears to be a weakness in the theory into a potential strength, suggesting a sophistication that goes far beyond simple picture-making and into the realm of experiential, symbolic wisdom encoded directly into the environment. And so we arrive at the beginning of the celestial story, the point where the sun's yearly journey commences and the cycle of life is reborn. In the eastern reaches of the great zodiac circle near the town of Street lies the figure said to represent Aries the ram. As the first sign of the zodiac, Aries holds a position of primal energy, symbolizing new beginnings, initiative, and the explosive force of spring. The proposed terrestrial form is a dynamic one, with the ram's curved horns often interpreted from the sweeping bends of old lanes and field boundaries, and its powerful body suggested by the gentle, rolling contours of the land as it slopes towards the Somerset levels. It's a figure that seems to capture a sense of forward thrust, of energy pushing forth from the earth after the long stillness of winter, perfectly embodying the spirit of the season it is meant to herald. This association is far more than just symbolic. It strikes at the very heart of the zodiac's proposed function as a giant astronomical calendar. In the tropical zodiac used in Western astrology, the sun's entry into the constellation Aries marks the vernal equinox, the moment in late March when day and night are of equal length and the sun begins its ascent into the dominant half of the year. This equinox was arguably the most significant date in the ancient world. For agricultural societies, it signaled the time to plow and sow, the critical window upon which the entire year's food supply depended. For spiritual communities, it was a time of profound ritual, celebrating the triumph of light over darkness, the resurrection of the sun god, and the return of fertility to the land. If the Glastonbury Zodiac was indeed designed as a sacred clock, then the Aries sector would be its most crucial marker, the fundamental anchor point from which all other timekeeping was derived. The theory becomes even more compelling when we consider potential alignments. Imagine a priest or astronomer standing atop Glastonbury Tor on the morning of the spring equinox. As the sun breaks the horizon, its first rays would not simply illuminate a random point on the landscape. Proponents of the zodiac suggest that the sunrise on that specific day would align perfectly with the terrestrial figure of Aries the ram. The light of the reborn sun would flood directly into the domain of the sign that represents rebirth itself. This would not be a vague coincidence but a precise, observable event, a moment of cosmic synchronization where the macrocosm of the sky and the microcosm of the earth were in perfect harmony. For those witnessing it, this alignment would have been a powerful confirmation of the sacred order of the universe, a divine signal that the time for renewal had officially begun. This celestial event would have translated into immediate and practical action on the ground. The Somerset levels, while marshy, offered incredibly rich soil when properly managed. The signal of the equinox, marked by the sun's alignment with the terrestrial Aries, would have been the cue for communities across the region to begin the arduous but vital work of preparing their fields. The synchronization of human activity with this cosmic rhythm was essential for survival, but beyond the practical, there would have been ceremony. We can envision processions moving towards the Aries figure, perhaps along the very trackways that formed its horns. Offerings might be made to ensure the land's fertility, and rituals performed to encourage the strength and vitality of the flocks, with the ram itself being a potent symbol of male virility. The entire area would have thrummed with a sense of collective purpose, all ignited by that one precise moment of alignment witnessed from the Tor. This connection to animal vitality is further reinforced by the archaeology of the region. Evidence from nearby lake villages, such as the one at Glastonbury Lake Village, shows that sheep were a crucial part of the local economy, providing wool, meat, and milk. The ram, therefore, was not an abstract symbol from a distant culture. It was a familiar and vital presence in daily life. To monumentalize this animal at the head of the zodiac circle would have been to honor the very source of their sustenance and wealth, linking the cosmic power of the spring sun directly to the fertility of their own herds. It grounds the celestial symbol in the earthy reality of survival, suggesting that the zodiac was not an esoteric mystery for a privileged few, but a living, breathing framework that connected the heavens to the most fundamental aspects of community life. The Aries ram, then, stands as a powerful testament to an ancient worldview where the spiritual and the practical were seamlessly woven together, each spring beginning with a sacred conversation between the sun in the sky and the ram in the fields. But the true test of the Glastonbury Zodiac theory lies not just in whether we can see shapes on a map, but in whether those shapes serve a purpose beyond the symbolic. The leap from a fascinating pattern to a deliberate design requires evidence of function, and for many, this evidence is sought in the precise alignments of the stars and sun. This shifts the investigation from art to astronomy, asking if these colossal earthworks act as a giant, functioning celestial clock. One of the most compelling lines of inquiry involves the idea of ley lines, those mysterious straight alignments that are said to connect ancient sites across the British landscape. Proponents of the zodiac suggest that these powerful terrestrial energy lines don't just randomly cross the countryside. They assert that many converge with deliberate intent upon the key figures of the celestial circle. For instance, a ley line traced from the iconic St. Michael's Church atop Glastonbury Tor might extend for miles, passing directly through the heart of the Leo figure before aligning with another ancient church or mound. Another could connect the chalice well, the cup of the Aquarian goddess, with a distant stone circle, its path charting a course through the Virgo formation. These alignments, if proven to be statistically significant rather than random chance, would suggest a level of geographical planning that is difficult to dismiss. It would imply that the creators of the zodiac were not only mapping the stars but also channeling what they perceived as the Earth's own energies, using these lines to connect and empower the individual figures, turning the entire system into a coherent, energized circuit. The most persuasive arguments for intentional design, however, come from the sun itself. The theory proposes that the entire zodiac complex is oriented with breathtaking precision to mark the most important days in the ancient calendar, the solstices and equinoxes. Imagine standing on Glastonbury Tor at dawn on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. As the sun crests the horizon, its first golden rays would not simply illuminate the landscape randomly. According to this idea, the sunrise would align perfectly along a specific axis, perhaps shining directly down the length of an ancient trackway that forms the spine of the Sagittarius figure, or flooding the entire form of the Gemini twins with light. Conversely, at the winter solstice sunset, the last sliver of the dying sun might be observed setting precisely between the horns of the Taurus, the bull, or directly over the head of the great dog near Langport. These are not vague correspondences, they are specific, predictable, and repeatable astronomical events. If demonstrable, such alignments would be the smoking gun, providing objective, mathematical proof that the landscape features were positioned to interact with the cosmos in a meaningful way. This would elevate the zodiac from a potential work of symbolic art to a sophisticated scientific instrument, a colossal observatory built not of stone but of the very land, designed to track the cycles of time with majestic accuracy. This celestial timekeeping would have had profound practical and spiritual implications for any ancient society. For an agricultural community, knowing the exact timing of the solstices and equinoxes was a matter of survival. It dictated when to plow, when to sow, and when to harvest. A landscape that literally marked these dates through solar alignments would have been an indispensable agricultural guide, its functions woven directly into the rhythm of daily life. But the purpose would have run far deeper than mere crop management. These solar events were moments of immense spiritual power when the veil between the worlds was considered thin. The alignment of the sun with a specific zodiac figure would have charged that part of the landscape with a unique seasonal significance. The summer solstice sunrise hitting the lion, a symbol of solar power, would be a moment of peak vitality and strength. The winter solstice sunset aligned with the Scorpio's sting, a symbol of death and transformation, would mark a time of introspection and release. This transforms the zodiac into an interactive ritual landscape. A pilgrimage would not be a random walk, it would be a timed journey. A seeker might travel to the Virgo figure at harvest time to give thanks to the Earth goddess, or to the Capricorn sea goat at the winter solstice to meditate on the theme of rebirth from darkness. The land itself, through its alignment with the heavens, would dictate the spiritual calendar, creating a lived experience where cosmology, agriculture, and religion were seamlessly unified. This potential for a deeply integrated, functional design is what continues to drive the search for evidence, pushing the mystery beyond the realm of pareidolia and into the realm of a potentially lost technological and spiritual achievement. Yet for all its imaginative appeal, the theory of the Glastonbury Zodiac stands on contested ground, facing a formidable challenge from the scientific and archaeological community. The principal counter-argument is rooted not in the landscape itself, but in the fascinating quirks of human perception. We are pattern-seeking creatures by nature. It's a survival trait that helped our ancestors identify predators in the dappled light of a forest or find edible plants among a sea of greenery. This innate skill, however, has a well-documented downside known as pareidolia, the subconscious tendency to perceive a familiar pattern or meaning where none actually exists. It's the psychological mechanism behind seeing the man in the moon, a face in the wood grain of a door, or the Virgin Mary on a piece of toast. Skeptics argue that the entire zodiac is a magnificent, county-wide example of this very phenomenon. When you begin with a predetermined template, the 12 signs of the zodiac, and then overlay it onto a complex, ancient landscape already rich with natural hills, meandering rivers, and centuries of human alterations like field boundaries and roads, it becomes almost inevitable that you will find connections. The curve of a river here might form a lion's tail. The meeting of 3 footpaths there might suggest a fish's eye. The critic would say that Katherine Maltwood and her followers are not discovering a lost masterpiece, but are instead engaging in a form of selective connect the dots, highlighting the features that fit the desired pattern while ignoring the many that do not. From a geological and archaeological standpoint, the features said to compose the zodiac have straightforward, non-mysterious explanations. The gentle ridges that form the bull's horns near Somerset are the result of natural geological uplift and millions of years of erosion. The waterways that outline the Phoenix are natural drainage patterns that have evolved over millennia, later modified by medieval monks and then Victorian engineers for land reclamation. The tracks and hedgerows that trace the limbs of these giant figures are the accumulated result of practical land management over centuries, paths worn by farmers moving livestock and boundaries established to mark property lines. An archaeologist would point to the complete absence of any physical evidence that would support a coordinated project of this scale. There are no tool marks suggesting the deliberate shaping of hills, no concentrated deposits of artifacts from the proposed era of construction near the key features, and no signs of the massive labor camps that such an undertaking would have required. If a civilization was capable of reshaping 10 miles of countryside, they would have left behind more than just suggestive shapes. They would have left pottery, post holes, and middens, the everyday debris of human activity. The silence of the archaeological record is, for many experts, the most deafening argument against the zodiac's intentional creation. The historical context also presents a significant hurdle. The concept of the 12-sign zodiac as we know it today is largely a product of Mesopotamian astronomy, which was then refined and transmitted through Greek and Roman culture. For this system to have been used in Somerset, there would need to be compelling evidence of direct and sustained cultural contact between prehistoric Britain and the ancient Near East during the Bronze Age. While there was indeed trade, Cornish tin was a valuable commodity, this falls far short of evidence for the transfer of an entire complex cosmological system. Furthermore, the specific interpretations within the Glastonbury Zodiac often deviate from classical forms. The substitution of a phoenix for Sagittarius or a goddess for Aquarius, while creatively satisfying, suggests a modern reinterpretation rather than the preservation of an ancient, consistent tradition. It looks less like the work of ancient astronomers adhering to a known system, and more like the creative synthesis of a 20th century artist weaving together Arthurian romance, theosophy, and local geography. This is not to dismiss the experience of those who feel a profound sense of meaning when contemplating the zodiac map. The power of the idea lies in its ability to deepen our connection to the landscape, to encourage us to see the familiar fields of Somerset with fresh, wondering eyes. That sense of enchantment is real and valuable, but we must ask a crucial question: is the meaning inherent in the land, placed there by ancient designers, or is it a meaning we project onto the land because it resonates with our own desire for mystery and connection? The skeptical view suggests the latter. It posits that the Glastonbury Zodiac is a beautiful, imaginative work of art, a way of seeing that enriches the landscape for modern seekers. But as a literal, historical artifact built by a lost civilization, it remains firmly in the realm of compelling speculation rather than proven fact. This critical perspective is not meant to destroy the mystery, but to ground it, challenging us to appreciate the landscape for its genuine history, a complex tapestry of natural forces and human endeavor, while still leaving room for the awe that such a place so powerfully inspires. So we're left with a landscape etched with compelling shapes, but the burning question remains: if this zodiac is a deliberate creation, just how old is it? The answer is far from simple, and the debate pushes us to consider wildly different eras, each with its own fascinating implications. The sheer scale of the features points to immense antiquity, but pinning down a specific century or even millennium requires us to sift through layers of history and geology. One of the most audacious theories places the zodiac's origins in the Neolithic period, the era of Stonehenge and Avebury. Proponents of this idea argue that the monument-building impulse that drove those societies to move multi-ton stones could easily have been channeled into large-scale landscape art. The natural features, the hills and river valleys, are certainly old enough, formed at the end of the last ice age. The crucial question is whether Neolithic people began to subtly enhance these features, using earthworks and trackways to clarify the celestial shapes. If they did, the zodiac would be a contemporary of the Great Stone Circles, a project spanning generations and reflecting a sophisticated, communal understanding of astronomy and sacred geography. This would make it one of the oldest and largest ritual landscapes in the world, a truly staggering concept that rewrites our understanding of prehistoric Britain. A slightly more recent, yet still ancient, possibility is the Bronze Age. This was a time of increased social organization and trade, when the knowledge of metalworking spread across Europe. Katherine Maltwood herself leaned towards this era, even suggesting a potential connection to Sumerian culture. The Bronze Age saw the construction of smaller, more localized stone circles and numerous burial barrows that often align with celestial events. The argument here is that the zodiac could represent a refinement of earlier Neolithic ideas, a grand synthesis of astronomical knowledge into a single, cohesive system. The presence of Bronze Age lake villages on the Somerset levels proves that communities were deeply attuned to this specific environment. They would have possessed the intimate local knowledge required to plan such a vast project, understanding the interplay of land and water that defines so many of the figures. The Bronze Age theory offers a compelling middle ground, suggesting the zodiac is not quite as old as Stonehenge but still a product of a deeply ancient and spiritually advanced society. Then there is a theory that turns the entire mystery on its head, the idea that the zodiac is not prehistoric at all, but a medieval creation. This hypothesis suggests that the learned monks of Glastonbury Abbey, a center of scholarship and spirituality for centuries, might have designed the zodiac as a giant, open-air allegorical map. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the abbey was at the peak of its power and wealth, and its monks were actively promoting Glastonbury's reputation as the ancient Isle of Avalon, partly to attract pilgrims and royal patronage. What better way to sanctify the entire surrounding landscape than to map the story of the quest for the Holy Grail onto it? The monks, with their knowledge of classical astrology from preserved Greek and Roman texts and their deep investment in Arthurian legend, could have directed local labor to modify existing field boundaries and drainage channels to create the figures. This would explain the lack of prehistoric artifacts linked to the site. The modifications would be medieval, blending seamlessly with the agricultural history of the area. In this view, the zodiac is not a lost astronomical clock, but a brilliant piece of theological and promotional storytelling, designed to make the very land itself preach the lessons of the Grail quest. Evaluating the evidence for each era forces us to confront the nature of the landscape itself. The natural topography, the hills that form the bull's body or the lion's back, is undeniably ancient, dating back thousands and thousands of years. This supports the Neolithic or Bronze Age theories. However, the features that often complete the shapes, the hedge lines, the rines, the footpaths, are far more recent in their current form. Many of the field boundaries visible today were enclosed in the medieval period or later. Skeptics argue this is the death knell for the antiquity theory, proving the shapes are a post-medieval illusion. Believers counter that these later features could simply be following much older, more subtle alignments, ghosts of prehistoric trackways or ceremonial avenues that were later formalized for farming. It's a classic chicken and egg problem. Did the medieval fields create the zodiac, or did they simply reinforce a pattern that was already imprinted on the land? Without conclusive archaeological evidence, like a prehistoric post hole dug specifically to mark the tip of a zodiac figure's horn, the question of age remains wide open, a puzzle that continues to tantalize researchers and enthusiasts alike. Yet the story of the Glastonbury Zodiac did not end with Katherine Maltwood's passing or the skeptics' dismissals. Instead, it found fertile ground in the cultural shifts of the 1960s and 70s, blossoming into a cornerstone of the burgeoning Earth Mysteries movement. This was a time of looking back to the land, of seeking alternative spiritualities and questioning purely materialistic views of history. For a generation exploring psychedelics, Eastern philosophies, and ancient wisdom, the idea that the British countryside itself was a vast, sacred text was electrifying. The zodiac became a powerful symbol of this new paradigm, a testament to an ancient, holistic world, where heaven and earth were intimately connected. It offered a compelling narrative that stood in stark contrast to the dry, academic archaeology of the time, inviting people to experience the landscape not as a collection of separate sites, but as a single, living entity pulsating with meaning. This revival was significantly propelled by the work of another remarkable researcher, Mary Kane. An artist and writer much like Maltwood, Kane took up the mantle with fresh enthusiasm and a keen eye for detail. She expanded upon the original theory, identifying additional figures and refining the outlines of others, bringing a new level of cartographic scrutiny to the idea. Most importantly, Kane played a crucial role in popularizing the zodiac, writing accessible books and articles that presented the mystery not just as an academic puzzle, but as an invitation to personal exploration. She framed the zodiac as a great labyrinth, a spiritual circuit designed for walking meditation. Her work effectively created a map for a new kind of pilgrimage, transforming Maltwood's esoteric discovery into a practical guide for modern seekers yearning for a direct, experiential connection with the sacred. And so, a new tradition was born. Every year, particularly around the solstices and equinoxes, individuals and small groups can be found walking the paths of Somerset, tracing the outlines of the giant figures with their own footsteps. These modern pilgrims are not looking for archaeological proof. They are engaged in a practice of geomantic resonance, seeking to feel the energy of the land and align themselves with the cosmic principles each sign represents. A walk through the nurturing form of Virgo might be a meditation on gratitude and harvest, while a journey into the challenging territory of Scorpio could be an inner exploration of shadow and transformation. For these walkers, the zodiac is not a relic to be studied behind a rope, but a living temple to be embodied. The act of walking itself becomes the ritual, a slow, deliberate way of soaking in the atmosphere and allowing the symbolism of the landscape to work on the subconscious mind. This practice taps into a deep, almost primal human need to find meaning in our surroundings. In an increasingly digital and disconnected world, the zodiac offers a tangible way to re-enchant the landscape, to see the fields and rivers not as mere resources but as characters in a grand, unfolding story. It satisfies a longing for pilgrimage that doesn't require a trip to distant lands, but can be undertaken in the heart of England. The experience is often described as profoundly grounding and yet simultaneously expansive, a feeling of being both deeply rooted in the earth and connected to the vastness of the cosmos. Whether one believes the zodiac was intentionally built or is a beautiful projection, the power it holds for those who walk its paths is undeniably real. It functions as a powerful psychological and spiritual tool, using the external geography of Somerset to navigate the internal geography of the soul. Today, the Glastonbury Zodiac exists in a unique space, straddling the line between historical mystery, spiritual symbol, and cultural phenomenon. It is celebrated in local art, referenced in shop names, and discussed in the town's many cafes. It has become an inseparable part of Glastonbury's identity, adding another layer to its reputation as a center for alternative spirituality. The mystery endures precisely because it cannot be definitively solved. It remains an open question, a perpetual invitation to look at the familiar world with fresh eyes and to wonder about the intentions of those who came before us. The zodiac challenges us to consider that our ancestors may have possessed a mode of perception and a connection to their environment that we have largely lost, a way of seeing that found the cosmic in the local and the eternal in the very soil beneath their feet. The power of the Glastonbury Zodiac mystery lies not just in its potential historical truth, but in its astonishing fertility as a source of creative inspiration. Long after Katherine Maltwood's initial maps were published, the idea continued to cast a spell, seeding itself in the imaginations of artists, writers, and thinkers who found in its vast, hidden forms a powerful new mythology for the modern age. Perhaps no single figure was more pivotal in broadcasting this mystery to a wider audience than John Michell, a writer whose work on sacred geometry, earth mysteries, and ancient wisdom traditions became a cornerstone of the alternative culture of the 1960s and 70s. Michell saw the zodiac not merely as a curious local legend, but as a profound demonstration of a universal principle, that the ancient world understood the earth to be a living being, whose sacred sites were arranged according to a cosmic blueprint of number and proportion. In his influential book, The View Over Atlantis, he presented the Glastonbury Zodiac as a premier example of a sacred landscape, arguing that its giant figures were part of a global network of geodetic alignments and terrestrial temples designed to harmonize human life with the energies of the planet and the cosmos. For Michell, the zodiac was irrefutable evidence of a lost, high civilization that possessed a sophisticated science of geomancy, a science we are only now beginning to rediscover. His eloquent and visionary writing transformed the zodiac from an eccentric theory into a central icon of the Earth Mysteries movement, inspiring a generation to see the British countryside with new, wondering eyes. This artistic resonance flowed naturally from the pages of esoteric books into the realm of fiction and poetry, where the zodiac provided a rich symbolic backdrop for storytelling. Novelists were drawn to the concept of a hidden map etched into the land, a perfect device for contemporary quest narratives. In the world of popular fiction, authors like Katherine wove the zodiac into their tales of ancient secrets and modern discovery, using the landscape of Somerset as a character in itself, a silent guardian of arcane knowledge. The zodiac structure, a circular journey with a sacred center, mirrors the classic hero's journey, providing a pre-built mythological framework for stories of personal transformation. Poets, too, found a deep wellspring of imagery in the giant effigies. The juxtaposition of the eternal stars above with the temporary, where the worn forms below, became a metaphor for the human condition itself, our fleeting existence set against a backdrop of cosmic time. A poem might dwell on the melancholy beauty of the Virgo figure, her body formed by fields that have been plowed for centuries, or the silent watchfulness of the Langport dog, a spectral guardian whose story is written in river and ridge. These literary interpretations are rarely about proving the zodiac's existence. Instead, they use its potent symbolism to explore themes of belonging, memory, and our eternal search for meaning within a landscape. The allure of the zodiac even extended into the evocative world of music, particularly within the progressive and folk genres where mythological themes flourished. Bands and singer-songwriters, especially during the 1970s, referenced Avalon, the Grail quest, and the terrestrial zodiac in their lyrics, creating soundscapes that aim to capture the same mist-shrouded, mystical atmosphere as the Somerset levels. The concept of a hidden, magical Britain just beneath the surface of the modern world was a powerful trope, and the Glastonbury Zodiac was its ultimate cartographic expression. This musical adoption served to emotionalize the mystery, translating its intellectual puzzle into a feeling, a sense of longing for a more enchanted world. The listener didn't need to understand the precise layout of the figures to feel the pull of the idea, the invitation to believe that the land itself could hold a secret melody waiting for the right moment to be heard. What unites these diverse artistic responses is a shared impulse to use the zodiac as a lens for re-enchantment. In a society increasingly dominated by rationalism and industrialization, the idea that an entire county could be a secret work of sacred art offers a powerful antidote to disenchantment. It suggests that wonder is not something we need to invent, but something we need to rediscover, lying in plain sight all around us. The artist who paints the phoenix rising from the levels, the writer who sets a novel of spiritual awakening within the zodiac circuit, and the musician who composes a ballad about the Lady of the Lake are all participating in the same act. They are not just depicting a mystery, they are actively keeping it alive. They are adding new layers of meaning to the landscape, ensuring that each generation has the opportunity to encounter the idea afresh and find its own significance. This cultural afterlife is in many ways as important as any archaeological evidence. It demonstrates that the zodiac's true power may not lie in its historical factuality, but in its enduring function as a powerful cultural symbol, a catalyst for creativity, a mirror for our deepest yearning for connection, and a permanent invitation to see the world as a place of infinite possibility and hidden meaning. Even after decades of investigation and passionate debate, the Glastonbury Zodiac remains shrouded in profound questions that ensure its status as a living mystery, not a closed case. One of the most tantalizing unknowns is whether the map is truly complete. Katherine Maltwood identified 12 primary figures, but could there be more hidden in the subtler folds of the landscape? Some researchers speculate about additional, smaller constellations nested within the Great Circle, or perhaps larger, more abstract patterns that encompass the entire zodiac itself. The concept of a 13th sign, Ophiuchus the serpent-bearer, sometimes mentioned in modern astrology, adds another layer of speculation. Is there a serpentine form coiled within the Somerset countryside, waiting to be recognized? This line of inquiry suggests that what we have seen so far might only be the most obvious layer of a far more complex and multi-tiered design, a celestial codex with volumes yet to be deciphered. This leads directly to the search for a central key, a definitive feature or alignment that could unlock the zodiac's ultimate purpose. Was it purely an astronomical calendar, a spiritual labyrinth for initiation rites, or something else entirely? Some theorists propose that the key lies not in a single location, but in a specific sequence, perhaps the correct order to walk the figures, a path known only to initiates, would reveal a hidden narrative or trigger a profound shift in consciousness. Others look for a mathematical key, a recurring geometric ratio or a precise unit of measurement used to lay out the entire scheme, which would provide irrefutable proof of intentional design. The search for this key is what drives modern research beyond mere map reading and into the realm of advanced technology, offering new hope for solving these ancient riddles. The most promising developments in recent years have come from archaeological science, particularly the use of light detection and ranging, or LiDAR. This technology uses laser pulses from an aircraft to create an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional map of the ground surface, effectively seeing through vegetation to reveal microtopography invisible to the naked eye. For Zodiac researchers, LiDAR is a revolutionary tool. It can detect the faintest traces of long-vanished earthworks, sunken trackways, and abandoned field systems that have been plowed flat over centuries. A subtle bank that might form the curve of a wing, or a ditch that completes the line of a leg, could now be revealed with stunning clarity. Already, LiDAR surveys of other parts of Britain have uncovered entire prehistoric landscapes that were completely unknown, revolutionizing our understanding of ancient settlement. Applying this technology systematically across the entire Zodiac area could either confirm the proposed shapes with newfound precision or reveal an entirely different pattern altogether, finally moving the debate from interpretation to hard data. Future research may also involve sophisticated geomagnetic and ground-penetrating radar surveys. These techniques can identify buried features without any digging, locating pits, post holes, or concentrations of burned material that might indicate ritual activity associated with the zodiac figures. If, for example, a geophysical survey were to find a pattern of ritual deposits consistently aligned with the outline of the Leo figure, it would constitute powerful evidence that the shape was indeed significant to the people who placed them there. The goal is to move from asking, "Does it look like a lion?" to asking, "Is there archaeological evidence of human activity that respects the lion's form?" This shift from pareidolia to provenance is the crucial next step for the investigation. The enduring fascination with the Glastonbury Zodiac ensures that the quest for answers will continue. It sits at a fascinating crossroads between archaeology, folklore, and personal spirituality. Whether one views it as a monumental fact of history or a magnificent work of collective imagination, its power is undeniable. It challenges us to look deeper, to consider that our ancestors may have communicated in a language written not on parchment, but on the very skin of the earth. The fields and hills of Somerset hold their secret closely, but with each new technological advance and each fresh pair of curious eyes, we come a little closer to hearing the story they have been whispering for millennia. The mystery endures not as a failure of understanding, but as a perpetual invitation to wonder. And so, after exploring these sprawling earthworks and celestial patterns, we are left standing at the crossroads of a truly captivating historical puzzle. On one side lies the compelling, intuitive evidence for the Glastonbury Zodiac. There's the sheer, breathtaking coherence of the map itself, where the gentle curves of rivers and the lines of ancient tracks converge to form recognizable shapes across a vast expanse. There are the powerful mythological echoes where the figures of a lion, a goddess, and a grail chalice resonate with Arthurian legends and ancient Celtic beliefs that saturate this land. And perhaps most persuasively, there are the potential astronomical alignments, the idea that the rising sun on a solstice would perfectly illuminate a specific terrestrial figure, turning the entire region into a functioning celestial clock. This interpretation suggests a society with a profound, almost unimaginable connection to their environment, viewing the land not as a resource to be exploited, but as a sacred canvas upon which to inscribe their cosmology. Yet the path of skepticism is equally well-trodden and intellectually robust. The human mind is a masterful pattern recognition engine, and the psychological phenomenon of pareidolia, seeing faces in clouds or shapes in random dots, offers a simple, elegant explanation for what might otherwise seem like a miracle. From this perspective, the zodiac is a magnificent, unintended Rorschach test projected onto the passive landscape. The geological and archaeological record adds weight to this view, pointing out that the natural hills and meandering waterways have straightforward explanations, while the field boundaries and tracks are the result of centuries of practical farming, not a grand, coordinated Bronze Age blueprint. The complete absence of any definitive physical proof, the tools, the labor camps, the ritual deposits that would accompany such an epic construction project remains the most significant hurdle for the theory to overcome. So why does this mystery persist with such vitality, captivating generation after generation? The answer, perhaps, lies less in the soil of Somerset and more in the depths of the human spirit. The Glastonbury Zodiac endures because it speaks directly to our innate desire to find meaning and connection in the world around us. In an age of increasing disenchantment, where the world can feel fragmented and transactional, the idea that an entire countryside might be a hidden masterpiece offers a powerful antidote. It invites us to see the familiar with fresh, wondering eyes, to consider that the world is far more mysterious and intentional than it appears. It proposes a reality where the cosmos and the earth are in a sacred dialogue, and where our ancestors possessed a wisdom we have since forgotten. This possibility is a profound source of inspiration, a call to re-enchant our relationship with the land. Ultimately, the truth of the Glastonbury Zodiac may be less important than the questions it forces us to ask about history, perception, and our place in the universe. It challenges the rigid boundaries between science and spirituality, between objective fact and subjective experience. It reminds us that a landscape is never just a collection of physical features. It is also a repository of stories, memories, and beliefs, a living tapestry woven from both geology and human imagination. Whether the zodiac is a literal construction or a symbolic lens, its power to inspire pilgrimage, art, and deep personal reflection is undeniable. It has become a permanent part of Glastonbury's soul, a testament to humanity's endless quest for wonder. So we leave you with this final thought to ponder. When you look at the landscape of Somerset, or indeed any ancient and storied place, what do you see? Is the Glastonbury Zodiac a forgotten masterpiece of ancient genius, a beautiful and coincidental work of nature, or perhaps a fascinating bit of both, a natural canvas that our ancestors recognized and subtly enhanced to reflect their beliefs? The evidence is there for you to weigh. The shapes are on the map, waiting for your interpretation. We would love to hear what you think. Does the idea of a giant celestial clock hidden in the English countryside spark your imagination, or does the skeptic's explanation feel more convincing? Share your perspective in the comments below, and let's continue this fascinating exploration together.